The other thing that I wanted to just kind of draw your attention to is the backwards design process. This is something that I think really underlies really good high quality assessment. Ultimately, you have to begin with the end in mind. What are the outcomes? What are the desired results that really matter to you? And then use that to guide the determination of what kind of evidence you need in your assessments in order to confirm that your students have actually accomplished those outcomes. Once you have your assessments in mind, then you can build the bridge, the scaffolding through meaningful learning experiences, meaningful interactions, activities, maybe even technologies that can help you bring students from wherever they're at ultimately to a point where hopefully they can accomplish those outcomes. And probably the most important part is to keep the focus on situational factors. And of course, in the middle of the pandemic, we would suggest that you consider very carefully what our students are experiencing, what we're experiencing, and ultimately try to consider all of those factors when deciding how you're going to teach your course. Now,
Bob, I'm going to cut in really quickly and just mention that that this is actually one of the things that I see a lot of my fellow faculty, either one of these slides is fine. Bob shared this slide deck with me and I said, well, you have all the things on this slide deck that that I would have put on there. And this one actually is really critical. And this is the thing that I think it's very easy in a face-to-face modality, especially for those of us who have been at this for a while, who have set syllabi, who have things that we just, you have a lesson plan, you walk in and you deliver that lesson plan, right? The courses I'm teaching this fall, this is the 6th offering of one of them and the 5th offering of the other, which has made shifting them online a little bit easier. But part of the reason that it has been easier to shift them online is that they are backwards designed by default. One of the things that we've talked about in my faculty learning community is that the pandemic to some extent has been the proverbial tide that has gone out on the skinny dippers. And that when the tide goes out, you can tell who is skinny dipping. And if this groundwork has not been laid, if the instructional faculty doesn't know why a particular assessment is being given, or is just given it because it is the standard assessment that's been given in this course up to this point, or it's just the thing that you do when you're teaching a 200 level English course or whatever, it becomes very difficult to then shift modality with that assessment, or to think about alternate ways of assessing, or to go around methods of, maybe how do we prevent students from cheating? Well, the only possible way is to figure out a way for me to look at them because I haven't thought my way through what it is I'm assessing and how else it might be that I could assess that particular outcome. And so in order to move this, right, one of my favorite analogies actually comes from Alton Brown, and he talks about how recipes can either be viewed of as a turn-by-turn set of directions like Google Maps, or a map where you understand the interaction of the various ingredients, and then it becomes easier to go, well, you know what, I'm going to add some balsamic vinegar here because it will spice up. And we have to know the map. We have to know not just the route, but the entire terrain. And this is how we get a sense of the terrain.
Absolutely. And I know it's difficult in the midst of the transition to remote teaching to really consider all those situational factors, but I think being open and having values that your focus is ultimately on helping students accomplish those outcomes is the best way to drive those decisions. And so spending time on identifying what you expect your students to leave the course with is probably the most valuable time you can spend. Related to backwards design then is this emphasis on trying to emphasize the things that are worth being familiar with, the knowledge, the content areas that you really want them to be exposed to, the things that are important for them to know and do, the skills that they have to have, but probably more important, certainly even related to what Jesse just shared, is that enduring understanding that you hope that they reach by the end of the course, that thing that you want to be able to have discussions with them, to be able to see them using down the road beyond the course. And one of the things I think we have to avoid, one of the things that I think is important, is to avoid curriculum speak with our students. We We often think in curriculum terms, but our students, they really think in terms of the kinds of questions, the kinds of skills, the kinds of things that you're going to offer them that are going to outlast the course. And so one last thing to consider are some of the essential questions that you hope to focus on. And when you think about the kinds of essential questions that really matter, you're talking about open-ended questions that don't necessarily have a single correct finite response, things that are emotionally engaging, things that help tap into higher order skills, things that focus on transfer, things that encourage debate and discussion, things that basically don't necessarily have a single right answer. Ultimately, you want to have questions that you know students can appreciate you're going to revisit throughout the entire course.